Hey everyone, my name's Kate Spurrier. I work at Apex Home Loans as a loan officer, and I'm involved a lot with the MMBBA. This is something that we're trying to just bring more value and help everyone, new loan officers that have been around for a while. I am chair of the education committee, and I'm also getting inducted to the board in September. So this quick little course is all about appraisals, not how to read an appraisal, not even what to look for in appraisal, but like common issues and things that are maybe something that you might not actually look at every day. So this is kind of your go-to if you have a weird one-off appraisal question, or you have an issue with an agent. This is going to give you a lot of really good advice on how to deal with that as well. So first things first, we're going to talk about actually ordering the appraisals. So USDA, conventional, and FHA are all going to be ordered through an appraisal management company. These are different for every mortgage company, but obviously it offers that degree of separation so that it's not being influenced, unfortunately, by us. That obviously led to some issues before, so we're trying to keep that separation there. As far as the VA appraisal orders, they're going to go directly through the VA portal. It's done in a round robin, so we don't have any control over who gets that appraisal. I will tell you, so I looked actually this morning, and you can look on VA's website, it's there for you as well, about the current timelines for the state of Maryland. And they haven't updated this, by the way, since April 2019. But right now we're on 10 business days. So what that means, it's not 10 business days until you get that report back. It's actually 10 business days for them to provide you an update. So at 10 business days, they have to give you an excuse or the report as to why it wasn't done. So keep that in mind. VA appraisals do tend to take a little bit longer than most. So just be sort of cognizant of that and make sure you're setting that expectation as well with your real estate agents. It's not 10 days, it's 10 business days. So Saturday, Sunday, national holidays do not count. Typically for your normal appraisals, the conventional USDA and FHA, I've seen anywhere from 5 to 14 business days. Obviously, if it's really, really busy like it is right now, appraisers are going to take a little bit longer. But the one thing that you need to make sure that you set great expectations are, if your appraisal is due, say on a Wednesday, a lot of times these appraisers will turn the report in at like midnight. So make sure that when you're telling your agents when they're due, set the expectation that you might not have that report for another day or so. Because if they're submitting it Wednesday at midnight, nobody's monitoring that. You're not going to see it till the next day to be able to update those agents. So make sure you think about that and build yourself a little bit of a buffer. The other thing I would recommend as well, some of the appraisal management companies have like a built-in quality control system that can sometimes also take a day or two for that appraisal report to get through until you can actually access it. So if you have that, make sure that you know what those turn times are, and then you can add a little bit of a buffer just to make sure that you're not over-promising to these agents and then under-delivering. So with all that being said, once you got your appraisal ordered, the next big thing is the appraisal coming back, obviously. Something that happens that a lot of loan officers are not aware of is something called an SSR, it's Submission Summary Report. And this report really, for the most part, does not matter to you unless there's an issue on it. So basically, this report is something that goes for all the appraisals are run through for Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And this is collecting all this data. It's kind of like Big Brother. But what it's looking at, it's actually spitting out a number about how risky this appraisal report is. So it's looking at things like the comps used, drastic increases of value. Maybe this is a flip property. Any sort of errors from public record. So it's going to give you a collateral risk score between 1 and 5. 1 is the best, 5 is the worst. Anything typically over 2.5 is considered worrisome at that point. At over 2.5, there's something called an LSAM that's ordered. This is typically going to be done on the underwriting side. But it's basically a more in-depth version of this submission summary report. So if you get a bad appraisal, house under appraises, it is not your underwriter's fault, is basically what I'm saying. And it's not necessarily even the appraiser's fault. We have all these checks and balances in place that are sort of on the back end that you may not know about. So this is something too that you may want to educate your agents about, so that they're not blaming the company, they're not blaming the appraiser. There's a lot more that goes into that than just the actual report. So another thing to sort of note is those SSRs, or the submission summary reports, are collecting all this data for Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. So if you've ever gotten what's called a PIW, or a property inspection waiver, this is why we're getting these, because all of these reports are running through these databases. So something to keep in mind with these is, if you get an appraisal waiver, whether it's a purchase or a refinance, and you decide, you and the realtors decide that you do not want to use it, you do not have the option to then go back if you get an appraisal that you do not like. And the reason is because it's run through this data software. So that appraisal waiver, you're not going to be able to get it again, because now they know there's been an appraisal done. So even if they were to go to another mortgage company, it's a conventional loan, you're going to have the same issue. So something to just keep in mind there. Typically, I think a best practice is, when you get a property inspection waiver, not only to talk to the borrower, but also to talk to the realtor as well. If they know the house isn't going to appraise, or they have some concerns, they may want the appraisal done. So just keep all of that in mind. It's, you know, typically you're going to see these PIWs on 1-unit properties, purchase and limited cash out or rate and terms, up typically 90%. You're not going to get them over 90% loan to value. And primary residences. Cash out investment properties, you're only going to see these up to a 75% LTV. We're going to start seeing more and more of these as Fannie and Freddie collect all of this data. So make sure you're running your DU and LP before you're submitting your loans and ordering your appraisals, just to make sure you actually need one. So if the SSR, the submission summary report, comes back bad, and that LSAM comes back bad, then we have to take another measure to make sure that this is really a good appraisal report. So at our company at Apex, and I can't speak for others, but I know that it's not a single underwriter that would make that decision. Typically, it's reviewed by a few, just so that we don't have one person to blame if things don't go the right way. So what would then happen if both of those came back very concerning with high risk ratings? We're going to order what's called a field review. So this is kind of an interesting thing. So basically what happens is, the listing agent's not necessarily going to know that this is happening, because they're going to do a drive-by of the home. They're not actually going to go in. There's not going to be a second full appraisal of the inside and all of that. But the second appraiser is given a copy of the appraisal that was already done, and then they do a drive-by of the property. They look at all their own comps. They put together a whole new report to see if it justifies the value of the first one. If that comes back the same, then that's the value that they would use. If it comes back lower, a lot of times it's going to be that lower value that's used. So just keep in mind that the value can change based on this field review, and make sure that you're being careful about that. Now, whether you get an appraisal that comes in low, or that's going to be the number one problem that you're going to have if you want to do this. So if you have an appraisal that comes in low, and you want to appeal, or maybe the agents want to appeal, or maybe the borrower wants to appeal, you need to use comps that the appraiser did not already use. And they need to be better comps, not just, if this is a house or resale and you're trying to use a brand new construction down the street, that is not going to fly. If you are trying to use a house that has 4 bedrooms and yours only has 3, probably not going to fly as well. You need to show that you have better comps, more recent comps, more comps that are similar to the property that is being sold or being appraised than what was used for you to have any chance of this working. In my experience, when agents have wanted to do an appeal, it's been very, very few over the years, but sometimes they give me the same comps that were already in the report, so that's not helpful. Or they give me comps that really aren't as good as what was used. So if that's the case, there's no chance that you're going to get that. So make sure you're setting the expectation with your agents and your borrowers, if they want to appeal, that they need to find something better, more similar to the property, closer to the property, things like that. So just keep that in mind. And the appraisals, how long are they good for? I know this is a question that we get a lot. Conventional are good for 120 days from the date the appraiser goes out to the property, not the date that you get the report. These cannot be transferred lender to lender. So if you have somebody and you steal a deal, life is great and they've already had appraisal done, guess what? You got to get another one done. Maybe there's a chance you'll get that PIW if they're putting enough down. But if that's not the case, you're going to have a new report done altogether. FHA are good from 120 days from the date the appraiser goes out to the property. Now, these can be transferred lender to lender. So it's an important thing to note. So if you seal an FHA deal, and they already got their appraisal done, you will be able to use that exact same appraisal, which is, great for the listing agents. They obviously are going to like that because then they know they're not going to have any issues on that front. So that's definitely a benefit there. VA appraisals are good for 6 months, and the appraisal is actually linked to the property, not the borrower. So if a loan were to fall through, another person using a VA loan could actually use that same appraisal report. So those can be transferred lender to lender. I will tell you that we've tried to do this, and even though you can do it, it can be really difficult to get the VA to do everything that they need to do to get this done in a timely manner. So just keep that in mind as well. And then USDA loans, they're good for, our appraisal reports are good for 150 days from the date the appraisal goes out to the property. Appraisals cannot be transferred lender to lender on USDA, so keep that in mind as well. So another thing that we hear, or maybe you've seen on listings when you've been writing pre-approval letters, is what kind of financing is going to work for that property. Let me tell you, the listings are almost never right based off of what I've seen. So I think sometimes realtors think that they know a little bit more about this than they actually do. So this is something to certainly educate your realtor partners about as well. So anything that's considered a health and safety issue, no matter what kind of loan you're doing, is going to be a problem. Things like mold, leaks, foundation issues, exposed electrical wiring, structural issues that are apparent, like there's termite damage and you see holes through the wood on the deck. That's a problem. Also things like major additions that were not permitted properly, that are very obvious that they were additions, that are not listed on SDAT or anywhere else. So that's something to be considering as well. Sometimes smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, things like that, based on the local jurisdiction as well. So FHA, some sort of things to look out for that we see a lot of that they want fixed: chipping paint, utilities, electricity and water to be on and running at the time of the inspection, rotting wood, broken windows or doors that don't open properly. VA can be a little more picky with certain things. One thing that they're extremely picky about is hand railings. And those are based off of county code, so it's not the same county to county. So sometimes it depends on the number of steps. Sometimes it just depends on how high it actually is that they want these railings. So that's something that we see a lot. Utilities being on, that's important for VA as well. Any type of rotting wood, obviously they want termite, so that's something they look for. Clear access to the property is something VA is really big on. They want to make sure if there's any easements that everything's recorded and everything's in good condition. So keep your mind about that. Also broken windows, doors, another thing the VA looks for. USDA, above the health and safety, something that some people don't know is that you can actually not use those loans on an active farm. And land can't be over 30% of the actual appraised value. So in cases where it exceeds that, it needs to be clearly documented that the land is not subdividable and that the amount of land is normal and customary for that area. So that can definitely be a challenge there when you're doing these USDA loans in some rural areas. So the last thing I'm going to cover is tips to tell your realtors to make the appraisal process quicker and easier for them. So I can't tell you how many contracts we get, and the seller's disclosing home issues, things that the appraiser is going to get a copy of the sales contract. They're going to see that, and they're going to specifically look for those things. So if you say, oh, we had a leak back in November, but we didn't fix it, or there's an issue with the roof, or there's an issue with the gutters, or an issue with the foundation, you might be better off having the client or the seller fix those before going under contract so they don't have to disclose those issues, especially if it's anything health or safety related. So keep that in mind. Another really important thing that seems ridiculous is the contact information for the listing agent. If they want to put the phone number for their brokerage, wonderful. But the problem is that they can't actually then get in touch with the actual listing agent to then schedule to be able to go into the property. So that's something else that you want to make sure that you have if the listing agent hasn't already provided. And the number one issue that I actually see on contracts that can cause holdups is that homeowners association or the condo association information not being provided. So these appraisers will actually call and verify this information. That's something that goes into the report. If there's no information listed, the information's not correct, it's outdated, whatever the case may be, that can cause a holdup. So number one thing that I would say is make sure you're telling your agents that they need to have the correct information, especially for condos and townhouses specifically. Single family homes, it's still important, but not quite as important as those condos and townhouses. But again, they want to verify that information a lot on their own. And a lot of these smaller associations are not super easy to find online. So just keep all of that in mind. But certainly if you have any questions, let me know. I hope you learned a few things that were above and beyond what you need to know to be able to do your job. But hopefully this will be helpful for you to explain things to agents. And also, take some of the blame off of your underwriting team. It's not, it's not always their fault, guys, I swear. But again, if you have any questions, let me know. And I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in person at some of the events coming up in the future. Have a great one.